One of the problems we face in modern times with our always online way of life is we start to get this attitude that everything is an emergency. Everything is important. And we put ourselves into silos of extremism. Go to the subreddit about some particular video game, and that's all that's discussed there, right? Because that's what the subreddit is about. Go to any online community of your choice, and it's extremely siloed. It's all about the topic that you are interested in. And on the surface, that would seem like it's great. You are interested in video games, so you go to the video game subreddit. You're interested in a certain brand of politics that interests you, so you go to the online community for that specific thing, right? Earlier this year, a couple months ago now, I went to a Genshin Impact convention in Dallas, Texas, because I always thought it would be cool to go to one, and now it's only 5.5 hours away. So I go into that, and it's an auditorium, a hotel space filled with a bunch of fans of that video game. And that's the only thing that's being focused on there, which is super cool. It's a fan convention for that game. What else would you expect? That's actually awesome. I thought it was pretty cool. Got some trinkets and signed stuff from some of the voice actors in the game, and you know, it was just a fun thing to do. But the reality is that was a small part of my day. I went and I got a cup of coffee, and I went into that auditorium, and I walked around that little convention maybe for an hour and a half, and then I left and I went to see the rest of Dallas, Texas, and then I went home. So it was like a 3-day road trip, and very little of that road trip was actually focused on attending that convention. That convention was a little side stop on a much broader trip. It wasn't really exactly worth being the sole reason for me to go down that way. It was just maybe an excuse for me to go to Dallas, and it was something to do while I was there, which was cool. What I'm getting at here, though, is when we put ourselves in a silo, when we're surrounded by people who are focused on a specific niche, it starts to seem as if the people in that space are completely defined by that one thing. If I'm on the Elder Scrolls subreddit, then the only thing we're talking about is Elder Scrolls. So you might, if you never left that subreddit, reach the conclusion that the people there only care about Elder Scrolls. That's what they think about all day, and they don't have any lives beyond that. Lately, there's been a lot of chatter in the video game space, MMO space, about the closure of New World, and I've made a couple videos about that myself. I think it's a total shame that New World has gotten the treatment it's gotten. I'm not a fan of Amazon game studios getting shut down. I'm not a fan of seeing real people lose their job as a result of AI investments. There's a lot to be said for all of this, and it's a tragedy to see a beautiful game get sidelined prematurely by what is essentially corporate greed and being tone deaf to a community and to people who've poured their life into something. So I'm not backtracking on any of that. Those are real world things that we can talk about, and they can be tragic in their own way. But somebody made a post in response to something I'd written on the New World subreddit, and they said, get a life, it's just a game, which is probably a bit rude. And you know, to be fair, the New World subreddit right now is completely filled with people who are bitter and salty and saying that they're in grief over the closure of that game, which actually hasn't been closed and isn't going to be closed in the near future as far as we know. It's just gone into maintenance mode. But anyways, I suppose I can see why somebody might look at a post I made in the New World subreddit and think that I am a no-lifer who just spends all my time focused on the New World video game. But you know what the reality is? The reality is I barely even play the game, and I went for pretty much a year without even thinking about it, really. It was only recently that I decided to kind of go back and dabble in it a little bit. So yes, I may spend time making a video online about New World. I might write a few Reddit posts about it, but I'm not spending my day thinking about it, right? It's just a thing going on in the video game space. Like, that's the reality of it. I can be dramatic about it. I can act like it's a big deal, but it's really not. It's not. I mean, yeah, it might be a big deal in the space. It's not a big deal in my life, though, right? So what I'm getting at here is that we do this with things that actually matter, with politics, with all sorts of different focus points in our life. We start to define ourselves by a specific small thing in society, and then we start to create ruptures, divisions, and it starts to become toxic and harmful. It's harmful when you have people divide themselves along partisan lines, and you start to have people who have attitudes like, I'm a Republican, and if you're a Democrat, I don't talk to you. You're a different kind of person. You are somehow an other, or vice versa. Somebody who's a a Democrat and says, well, I would never talk to or endorse a Republican, right? Like those kinds of attitudes, we see them become more and more common in society. And the reason why we see that is because it's gotten easier and easier to immerse yourself in something which validates and focuses on a specific position at the expense of every other position. And then you start to reach the conclusion that certain things are more important to people than they really are. Take politics. As much as people like to say that politics is a big part of their life, it really isn't. People go to work, they go to the coffee shop, they go to the bar, they go to the ball game. People do a lot of different things in their lives. Thinking about politics is not really something that most people, even the diehards, spend all that much time doing. They might when they're in their online space of choice. They might think about politics a lot. And the more people start to feel like they're going to get points to level up their character in life if they align themselves with a specific faction, the more interested they start to become in it, because it starts to be a social thing, right? Like, people getting involved in politics is often kind of about the same thing as people being long-term fans of a MMORPG. The more time they spend in it, the more there's a sunk cost fallacy, and the more there's like social elements that make people feel like they really need to stay true to their party line, because if they don't, they might lose social connections or lose some sort of, guild status, right? So there's that. But the more life tends to include things that polarize us and put us into little camps where we focus on a very narrow bandwidth of topics, the more we start to see that polarization happen along every single possible line. Like, it used to be that if you were into computer games, then it didn't matter what kind you were into, right? Video games were video games. Computer games were computer games. Maybe there's a little bit of a division between folks who played consoles and people who played on PC, because there's different kinds of games that you could play on the PC from what you'd probably be able to play on, say, a PlayStation. So it'd be kind of like the difference between shooters and arcade type games and more UI intensive games like city builders and stuff like that. But then it started to get even more fractured, started to become a thing where even within genres, people divide themselves and say, well, you know, I'm not a fan of RPGs, I'm a fan of MMORPGs. And then within MMORPGs, now people will say, well, you know, are you a fan of sandbox MMORPGs, or are you a fan of theme park MMORPGs? And there's a difference, and we are not the same. Well, you know, it keeps on going. Whether you're talking about games, or you're talking about politics, or you're talking about anything else, everything in life increasingly is something which is not so much about bringing people together as it is creating silos that separate and keep people apart. We can be constructive instead of destructive by being aware of this and understanding that you can care about something, you can be passionate about something, and it can also not be extremely important to you. And that feels a little bit awkward, to say that something can be important and also not important all at the same time. For example, I'm a fan of Albion Online. It's a full loot MMORPG. It's probably the only full loot MMO that has been successful. And it's a really cool game, but it's also filled with ganking and risk. And often the battles you'll encounter in the full loot areas of Albion Online are not fair. And so if you're a solo player who isn't skilled with PvP, you're probably going to get ganked by a group of people who will take all of your stuff and send you back to town in your underwear. That's part of the game. And it seems kind of toxic. And I don't really like that part of the game. But without making this a rant about any of that, I may not like the experience of that, but as much as it seems like a big deal when I'm playing the game and I lose all of my stuff, it's not a big part of my day. It doesn't affect me financially. It doesn't affect me in any way whatsoever. It's just a game. Nor would I ever have any hard feelings toward the people who play the game, even if I wound up on the wrong side of some PvP combat with them there. So you see, it's not a big deal. It feels like a big deal when I'm playing the game. But if you didn't know any better, you might think that loss in a game is extremely personal and carries over into real life. That's what you would think if you were looking at the in-game chat of a player who's raging because they lost a battle. But the truth is, we move on with our lives, and things that seem really important in the echo chamber aren't really important when you get people out from behind the screen sitting at an actual table talking about their lives together. Same thing with politics and all of the other things that divide us. You can take people that seem like they are polar opposites on the internet, and if you actually put them together in a room, it's not going to be very long until they discover that there is more that they have in common than there is that divides them. When you take people who are opposites and you put them all together in an echo chamber, pretty soon they lay aside all of those things that they thought were good reasons for division, and they start to create a new atmosphere of community and togetherness. But to do that, you have to get people to connect. And that is the crux of what we struggle with in our society as it is today. It's easier than ever not to connect on a physical level. People struggle to have phone conversations. People struggle to connect with other people in real physical spaces. They want to go to Instagram, but they don't want to have a real conversation with a real person, right? They want to have 300 friends on Facebook, but they don't want to have a few real ones in real life. And the more we go into that territory, the more we start to have cause for wrongfully hating each other and wrongfully reaching the conclusion that things that actually represent a small part of our life actually constitute a major part of our identity. Being aware of that is helpful because then we can just kind of ignore a little bit of it. You can say, yeah, there's things that I have a position on that's different than maybe what you do. And we could even have dramatic disagreements about things. But we can also simultaneously agree that even if we have major disagreements, they aren't major divisions. That's important. Now, for example, talking about politics again. I am a person who voted for Donald Trump. I'm a person who generally leans toward a moderate Democratic position. And the purpose of this isn't to really go into all of the whys. But the bottom line is that despite the fact that I chose to support Trump and the Republican Party, to be honest, I supported the Republican Party more than Trump. That's one of my objections, because it has become a thing where Trump is now a cult of personality. People aren't voting for Republicans, they're voting for MAGA or Trump. And when you're obsessed with one person instead of the idea of a broader group, that's dangerous and that's unhealthy and it's ridiculous in my opinion. But let's just go with it. I vote a Republican ticket in 2024. I don't like what the administration is doing in 2025. So I make a point to say I'm going to vote differently in 2026, 2028. So what does it feel like if you change your position and then you realize that you're going to ultimately draw the ire and hatred of both sides? The people on the far right are going to want to disassociate with me because I'm not part of their camp anymore. I'm a sellout. The people on the far left are going to hate me because I'm one of the others who are part of the enemy camp. You see? So just by being willing to reconsider my position periodically and change my position based on what I feel is right, I'll probably wind up not being able to actually be accepted by anyone on either side. So that kind of sucks, right? But then it also adds to that tendency that the pendulum always swings back and forth more and more dramatically with each swing, because nobody treats each other very well. So eventually it kind of doesn't matter who wins, right? Because whether you're extreme right or extreme left, it both leads to some kind of tyrannical, ridiculous behavior that starts to curtail people's liberties and erode respectful society. And then you start to realize that we're getting to a place in our society where there's problems that are creating fractures. And those problems are not necessarily problems generated by ideologies. They may be problems which manifest themselves in a lot of different ways, but they're actually generated by the technological revolution, which is seeping into every part of our lives. This is the first time in history that we've had a society that is as influenced by technology as ours currently is, whether it's artificial intelligence or advanced automation or the ability to share everything in real time. What's difficult about this is that it's not a purely black and white thing. You could say, well, technology is bad. We should go back to the Middle Ages. And maybe the nostalgia of that, if you will, is the reason why there's so many computer games that put us in a medieval village or a fantasy setting that's reminiscent of the Middle Ages. We long for simpler times when life was just about gathering, crafting, and doing simple things, working with your hands to create a future for yourself. But then we also don't want to go back to a time before modern plumbing existed. We don't want to go back to a time where superstition and ignorance and the inability to disseminate information was normal. The world we live in is beautiful, it is amazing, and there's a lot of stuff to really get excited about all the time. I'm not even anti-AI. There's applications for artificial intelligence which are really cool to see. Like the add-on for Skyrim, somebody put together. It's too crude for me to want to really play it because it's janky and it's, you know, pretty easy to tell that this was a very, very rough draft of what is actually possible. But somebody did figure out how to attach a LLM model to Skyrim so that you can have a AI powered conversation with any character in that game. And it's not fun really because it's very crude, but you can definitely tell how a few generations of this technology down the line, if it was implemented in a professional way by a major studio, imagine how immersive that would be. You don't have NPC dialogue that repeats itself over and over again because every single NPC you can have an organic conversation with. Every playthrough would be in many ways unknown what the outcomes would be because it would be a story that evolves on a basis of AI governing it. That would be pretty cool if you could find a good way to combine human artistry, human passion, human storytelling with an AI infused engine that would actually deliver the best of both. But that often isn't what happens. What happens is things like what Amazon Studios is doing, or the Amazon company is doing. Shut down a game like New World, which has a team of dedicated developers, and then pour money into something like an AI-powered Snoop Dogg courtroom game, which is pretty dang cringy. So instead of using technology in a way that helps make everyone's life richer, sometimes we just take the path of the lowest common denominator and we use tools which are amazing when used correctly as an excuse for just making everything less meaningful. the challenge is to find a way to walk a line, to have a balance between being gutted by change and left behind, losing ourselves on the way, and embracing change while also keeping an essence of who we are. There isn't any sure solution there, but the first step will always come back to awareness. Awareness that balance is what we need, not absolute inclusion or omission. That we need to be willing to embrace things while also being willing to be skeptical. That we need to embrace new things while also being willing to say that not every single thing that is new is automatically good. Just like social media. I'm all for saying cut down on your social media intake, cut down on your phone time, cut down on all of those things that can be addictive elements in your life. But does that mean that you should not have a cell phone? Does that mean that you should not have any online presence? Well, that doesn't really work, because these are things that actually do provide positive utility too. That's the hard thing in life. As much as we want a clear answer that just says 100% of the time you should do this, or 100% of the time you should not, the actual answer is always in the middle. It's you should do what is right for you, and you should do what is right for others. You should be respectful of everyone, and you should value everything in its season, in its turn, and accept what it is and isn't with a genuine desire for balance, not picking a side and then going to the farthest extreme. That's true for how we spend our time, how we structure our relationships, how we choose whether we want to embrace or abstain from new things and social norms. We don't want to go back to the dark ages, but we also don't want to lose our identity in favor of something that is foreign to having a place for humanity in it. It would be my hope that we can become something a little bit more like Star Trek's Federation and a little bit less like Star Trek's Borg, if that makes sense. We want to embrace technology and connection, but we don't want to lose ourselves along the way. A good way to maintain that balance is by remembering that even if it sometimes doesn't feel that way, we're all in this together, and there is more that connects us and unites us than there is that divides us. As always, good luck on your adventure, and good luck trying to find balance in this crazy world we call home. Till next time, thanks so much.